Hi, I'm Ellie Durant from midwifediaries.com. I've been a qualified midwife in the UK and New Zealand, and these days I have a supportive business for midwives, student midwives and aspiring midwives. I've run some conferences. We have the Secret Community for Midwives in the Making on Facebook, which is a near 20,000 strong group at this point, with particular support for people entering the profession or students. And today I am going to be interviewing an aspiring student midwife over Skype. This is a practice session before she goes to her university interviews. This is the kind of session that is something I offer through my business. I get a huge amount out of supporting the midwives of the future. And I think it's really important because many of us have brilliant skills as midwives, but we haven't been in a position where we're under a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, and we need to communicate our values and what we can bring to the profession at a very high level, because midwifery is so competitive to get into. So these kind of sessions really help practice that pressure. There are two different kinds of interviews, and we'll be addressing both kinds today because we don't quite know what this candidate is going to come across in her interview cycle. So we have the multiple mini interview format, which is almost like a little interview fun assault course. It's a series of scenarios or questions for you to engage in, or sort of little acting pieces you have to do with particular members of staff or sometimes even service users, and they tend to be complex ethical questions to get stuck into. They can be really fun those days, but perhaps a little surprising if you haven't done those kind of interviews before. So you'll find out exactly what's going on there and how I think it's best to address those kind of questions. And then we'll do some traditional interview questions, just sort of panel interview, one-to-one. We'll cover some of the basic questions and some of the more complicated questions. Of course, you can't prepare for absolutely everything. That's sort of the nature of interviews, but there are certain things you can do to ensure that you answer every question to the best of your ability. And it's about finding the special things that you have, what's going to crop up in your career, what are your qualities that you can bring to women. And I hope that I'll be able to show you exactly how to get your ability to care for women over in each and every question. Sometimes it's very easy to forget that we're not talking about what we want to do, what we'd find fulfilling, but in an interview, your admissions tutors are looking for the midwives of the future. So every single one of your answers has to illustrate what you can do for those women. You have to keep bringing it back to this point. I'm not going to tell you the name of this particular candidate. I don't know quite until I log on to Skype whether she wants to be sort of videoed or whether she would prefer to remain anonymous. That's totally up to her. So we will get stuck in shortly. Just to reiterate, midwifery is very competitive to get into, and this kind of experience watching this video will help you understand, even if you have all of the right qualities to be a midwife, it will just help you understand how to get that into an interview context. And that's something I'm really passionate about, because depending on, midwives come from many different routes. They can be just out of school when they come to train, or they can be somebody with an entirely different background. It doesn't matter, but what does matter is you know the philosophy of midwifery and you know how to get that into every answer as well. So that's sort of what we'll be concentrating on in every interview. That's what I concentrate on, but in particular, as this one's going to be a learning resource. This will be quite a long session. They tend to run for about an hour. There will be times where this candidate will be given a little bit of time to think before responding, and if that's the case, I'll be pausing the video so you don't have to sit through that bit. But if you make it all the way to the end of the video, I will let you know about how you could book this kind of interview for yourself and get that personalised feedback. And there is a discount as well, so we'll talk about that right at the end. I know what it's like as well. You're sitting in front of your computer and you're going to have 1,000,001 distractions right now. You've got your phone, you've got WhatsApp, you've got Facebook. try and give me your full attention. I am so excited about this candidate who is letting us sit in on her time and her learning as a student midwife to be. I think it's really brave of her. And we all know that if you can concentrate on just one thing and not flick between different activities, you're going to get an awful lot more out of the learning experience. So I think you owe yourself that as a future midwife, as somebody who knows how to learn. So I'd really appreciate it if you could turn your phone off and when you watch this video get fully immersed in it. So I'm here with our lovely candidate who's so very kindly said that we can record her interview. First of all, we're going to do some traditional interview style questions, and she's got loads of brilliant experience for midwifery. This is a mature student and she has had some experience with interviews, but for various reasons it went a little bit pear-shaped, nothing to do with her personally, but just one of those things. And then we'll do some multiple mini interview questions. So yeah, we'll crack on. Okay, so if you just imagine you've walked into your interview and you've introduced yourself and the panel's there, and they ask the very first question is, could you tell us what midwives do and describe some of the activities they get up to and the functions that they serve?
Okay, so So midwives is a very long history. They obviously, to me, the biggest job that a midwife does is to help other women bring life into the world from the minute that they get pregnant to weeks after the baby's born. They bring strength and support to the whole family at an amazing time. They empower women to go through altering physical experiences. Their bodies change daily. They go through lots of changes every single day. They help with after the baby's born with breastfeeding.
With breastfeeding. Okay. So that's a good scope there. Can you think of any sort of specific areas of care that midwives get involved with? Any professionals they might work alongside?
Oh yeah, so they work alongside doctors.
Mm-hmm.
They work with high risk ladies, low risk ladies, diabetic ladies, healthcare professionals, multi-agency teams. They safeguard the patient, the family, other children.
Mm-hmm. Anything you want to add?
No. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Could you tell me some of the challenges that midwives are facing at the moment in the UK?
Okay, well, I know that a big challenge is the number of midwives. I read somewhere recently that every single year, with all the midwives that leave the NHS, or the profession, only one midwife gets added. So with all those people that are going through university, there's only one extra midwife per year that get added into the healthcare profession.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very like they need more midwives to keep everything going.
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh.
Okay, think about some of the so that's something. The staffing is definitely an issue, and we think perhaps the government is going to be trying to supply some more midwives, which would be very nice. There's rumours of 3,500 extra, which would be brilliant. Can you think about some of the challenges that midwives have with the particular clients they look after these days?
Oh gosh, there must be so many challenges. Everyone likes to have their care a certain way, which is fine. That's fantastic and great. But you have to be able to look after that family or that individual, that mum, without judgment, to accept the way that she wants her care to go. You have to always take on the fact that people are different religions. People go through different disappointments, different journeys, different ways of having the children.
Okay.
And you have to treat everyone as individuals, and that's got to be hard sometimes, because you've got to what that person is wanting, not for them to adapt to how you want to be.
Lovely. Okay. Could you tell me why you would like to be a midwife?
Okay. So I want to work with women and their families during the transition and change, and assist in the process of people giving birth. I want to empower women to make choices about their bodies that bring them health, confidence, and strength. I think being a midwife is a massive privilege. I think birth is a life-altering physical experience that has the power to be spiritually meaningful, and for a family to let you be part of that journey, whether that's the journey when the fetus is 6 months old, to whether that's the journey when the baby's coming out. I just think it's just one big, massive privilege to just be part of it. I've been drawn into midwifery since having my own 2 children. I had 2 completely different birthing experiences, and both of them I feel I had support and a tower of strength from a midwife assisted me and my husband. I want to be that strength for somebody else, for some other women, when they're going through sometimes not an amazing time. Like, we all expect everything to be fantastic, but it's not always. And then when I worked as an MSW at the JR, I was very lucky enough to work on FMU, and we got to see, the not so good side of pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
Not everything went great. Sometimes it was, sometimes it's not. We saw women when they were happy because they heard their heartbeat of their babies. We saw women when they weren't so happy and they were having blood transfusions, and I found that I had a real good empathy with them. Sometimes it was just letting them cry, just bringing them a cup of tea and some, tissues. Other time you'd get life stories out, and I just found that women had a natural trust to me. And the reason I wanted to be a midwife and not of a healthcare profession is just because of my positive experience with midwives. I love the fact that midwifery can be seen all the way back to the Bible. Joseph's sister was a midwife, and I just want to be part of that. I want to be part of that journey.
That sort of heritage. Okay, lovely.
Yeah.
So could you tell me about some of the reading around the subject that you've done?
Okay. So I found, very recently, I don't know if it's because I've just come across it from where I worked, but I found that very recently I've done a lot of reading on FGM. Mm-hmm. I've also done my case study on FGM in my access course. Mm. I think it's a very prominent thing that is definitely due to the intake of refugees and people moving to the UK from countries where FGM is prominent. I think it's something that we definitely need more training on. It's something that we shouldn't ever just think of the effect of what it's done physically. There's also a very big mental issue there. I've read quite a few books. I've read a book that I got recommended called, I can't remember her last name, but Doris something. And this is a lady that very, very easily wrote this book about her experience with FGM. And for some reason, it just really, really touched me. And it's just something that I've kind of taken on board. And I just think it's, something that in the NHS, it's something that we can help and we can deal with, and we can help educate women, and we could help maybe with their birthing experience if we make more of an effort of trying to find out what it is that we could do to help.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about this. So that subject in particular is something very close to you. Why do you think you chose that sort of subject in particular? Was it because you had experiences with women in your care, or?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I was very lucky to work with a clinic, only as a kind of add-on to the clinical work that I was doing as an MSW. And I got to talk to one of the doctors there. And I just knew, from that moment, I just knew that that's kind of something where it was an interest that I knew that I would naturally, I'd want to help in. Like, I feel like I can talk to women in a non-judgmental way. And if they can open up to me about that, then we could help give her the best birthing experience that she could possibly get.
Yeah.
If we're able to, I was very lucky because I did get to speak to women that had it done, that had moved to England from Somalia and places like that. And they're all, you find that they're quite open, but quite a lot of them have said that when they had their first babies in England, they never realised that it was an issue. In their country, everyone has it done. So they'd come over here, and it wouldn't be till the day of birth, or coming close to the day of birth, that they realised that they had, or that the hospital realised that they had FGM done. And at this point, it then became where the baby might have got stuck. We never really went into their births. But I know that quite a few of them have said that it was horrendous.
Yeah.
And I just think if it's something that we knew or had more, if every single midwife had more knowledge on it, then it's something that can be stopped or helped prior to the birth, so that things could be put into place, so that the baby could be helped out a lot easier.
Absolutely,
that's pain.
Unjust, isn't it? It's it's a subject a lot of us are passionate about. Okay, so moving on to the next question. Across the UK at the moment, there's only 17% of women still exclusively breastfeeding their babies at 3 months, and in countries like Norway, exclusive breastfeeding rates are close to 40% at this point. Can you tell me what you think about some of the life challenges mums might have in terms of breastfeeding, establishing breastfeeding, carrying it on in the UK?
Yeah. Can I talk about my own experience?
If you think that's applicable, yeah, of course.
Okay. So I found that with my children, so I was very lucky. I managed to breastfeed both of mine until they were 2 years old. But there was times with both children, especially the youngest, because my husband had gone away at this point because he was in the RAF, and I found that there was nowhere in the middle of the night when you were struggling that you could ring and just say, is there anything I can do? Can you help me? Or that person that you just need to talk to because you're not sure if the baby's getting enough milk. And I really feel like women aren't given enough support to breastfeed. They're not given, and it's daunting. It's really hard to just, when your baby's crying and crying and crying, and you're feeding the baby again and again, and your boobs are hurting and your nipples are sore and red raw. But sometimes only if there was just some way of somebody going, do you know what, it's okay, you're doing all right. I think enabling women, telling them how well they're doing, maybe a few more health visits, just if that's the choice that you go in. And I think it's okay to then say to women that, you know, if breastfeeding's not for you, it's not a judgment, you know. It's okay to, you've got to do what's best for you and your family.
Mm-hmm.
But if the lady's asking for support, then I definitely think there needs to be more 24-hour support, not where you're phoning up, like, you know, the midwifery department, and you know that they're busy, and yet you just need somebody to just say to you, you're doing okay.
Okay, so those are some of the support issues that women certainly face.
Yeah.
Is there anything else in the UK in terms of culture or anything you'd like to comment on?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of judgment in the UK of a woman being out and about feeding her baby. It makes it hard when you've got to think, okay, I've got to go shopping, or I've got to go pick up my other child, but the baby needs feeding, and you know that people are going to look at you and kind of judge. Like, I had a few situations where I'd gone into cafes to go feed, and I know cafes now are a lot, you know, you can get the breast, you know, happy breastfeeding kind of sticker things. I know we have those in Swindon. But I'd gone into cafes before and just had a few dirty looks, a few kind of comments off older ladies, particularly. I think also with, you know, women going back to work as well. They decide to go back to work, then they've got to start thinking about the baby and who's going to look after the baby, and letting them have time with, so that the baby can get to know them more. And I think as women, definitely between my first and my second child, there seems to be more of a kind of expectancy that you're going to go out and do more and have more pressure put on you to do things, when sometimes you just want to kind of be at home and be with your baby.
Yeah. Okay. So that's Let's draw that question to a close. So how would you ensure a good work-life balance on a midwifery course?
I know it's going to be very, very difficult doing balancing between work, uni, the kids, my husband. But I think the main thing I have to do is prioritise. So, you know, for 3 years of my life, my life is going to be uni. Me and my husband and the children have all sat down and talked about it. They totally understand, they totally support me. You know, I've said that sometimes obviously I'm going to be having to go, okay, can you go and do this because I need to concentrate on this. But also we said we need to, when I've got days off and I'm caught up with work, our plan is to set time aside for us to do family things, whether that's go to the beach, whether that's just have a meal together, because we've all been working. I plan to, down to the time, down to timings, I'm going to have a schedule set up for all of us, for after school clubs, for clubs that my husband does, for clubs that both the children do, my work schedule, my husband's work schedule, and just go from there. I know it's going to be hard, I know it's going to be really hard, but I'm lucky that my whole family just support me.
Okay, lovely. So that brings this bit of the interview to a close. Obviously, I'm not an admissions tutor, but if we were sitting at the university you're going to and your admissions tutors asked you at the end of the interview, is there anything you want to ask us? Do you have a question prepared?
I haven't today, no.
Okay. Can you think of one if that happened? And I'm putting you on the spot here, I know, but if that happened, could you think of one on, just something that you're interested in, or you'd like to ask an amazing group of qualified
I think I
midwives?
would ask on how the teaching is put forward.
Okay.
Such as, like at UE, I know that they do the spiral. So you learn a little bit of 3 main topics every year, and then they build on those topics. And I just ask how they would establish that. And I think I'd ask about.
That's okay. You might wanna think about, as you're preparing. It's always a really good idea to do some research on the uni.
That ask is about what kind of help I would get with my disability.
Okay. Yeah, that's important.
Yeah, because I'm dyslexic, ADHD, and dyspraxic. So I do have panic attacks in exams. So that would be
okay.
Normal question.
yeah, making sure you have the support there. So that's really good. You might be able to ask student services on the day, something like that. Often unis have really good support available. It might be also a good idea. Remember that the rule is the best applicants always bring every question back to what they can offer midwifery. So you might think you're just having a chat at the end, but it all still counts. So it's not that anybody's trying to catch you out, it's just that you have a short amount of time with this group of professionals who are choosing the midwives of the future. So everybody likes to hear about the good things that they're doing as a university, and it will probably fire you up to give a really good interview and want to go to that university if you know, for instance, they actually have a specialist midwife who is doing some work with FGM, with female genital mutilation at the moment, or just who's working with refugees, or you might want to ask something about caseloading care and when that comes into the course. So that kind of thing can be really helpful. Sometimes we come to a situation where it's so comprehensive, all the information you've been given that day, that you really can't think of anything else, and it's totally fine just to say, you know what, I had tons of questions when I came in this morning, but I think you've answered them all really well, and I'll get in touch if I've got any further questions. That kind of thing is totally fine. Okay, so we'll move on to some feedback shortly. Okay, so feedback for the traditional interview bit. First question was, what do midwives do? What are some of the activities they do, and the functions that they serve? I think you were, it happens to all of us, I think you were quite nervous to begin with, and that affected the way you were giving your answers, because I get the feeling that you have practiced this an awful lot. It's just the fact that it's not on the tip of your tongue when you come to answer. So it's absolutely fine to just you don't have to plunge into your answer straight away. Time will appear to be going a lot slower than it actually is. So if you just go, that's a really good question, and take a second to settle yourself, and the admissions tutors will know that they're going to get your real thoughts and feelings rather than just your initial reaction. So that can be quite helpful. You talked about, what ran through your interview was that you loved the history of midwifery and being with women, which is just lovely. I'm not sure you can teach that stuff, teach that kind of passion. So that came through really well. You sort of talked about from the minute they get pregnant until weeks after the baby's born. So you have got the scope of midwifery. You could, if you wanted to, use the same technical language that midwives are familiar with, because then you're speaking the same language as them. Sorry?
Is that antenatal and prenatal?
Well, antenatal and prenatal are broadly the same thing. They say prenatal in America a lot more. So the antenatal period is pregnancy, and then the intrapartum period is labour and birth, and then the postnatal period is after the baby's born. So you can talk about those periods, and that makes it very clear that you know what the role of a midwife is straight from the beginning. So you were talking about strength and support, really good. The support for women going through different physical experiences, breastfeeding. I did have to prompt you, I think one of the things that it might be good to practice is just do a question a day and do it in front of the mirror and time yourself a couple of minutes, because that's probably all you're going to have to respond in an interview. Some of your answers went on for probably just a little bit too long, and although the content of them was really good, it might be that they cut you off. Having said that, don't be too worried in an interview if you are cut off and they want to redirect you. Doesn't mean you've done something wrong, it just means they want to hear about something else.
Yeah.
So when I prompted you, you said multi-agency and sort of the people that midwives work alongside, doctors. You could think about sort of talking about that in a little more detail. So social workers, lactation consultants, paediatricians, obstetricians. You could do a little bit of reading, and I could send you that on the different kinds of professionals midwives are going to come across. As well, midwives don't just work in hospitals, and it's quite important to get that across, that you know that, because the philosophy... Sorry?
Working in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. So the philosophy of midwifery overall is that they are experts in normal childbearing. So unlike doctors or obstetricians, paediatricians who are experts in coming to help when things have got complicated or when there's a medical need. So if you can mention community settings, birth centres, home birth, all of that kind of thing, you're showing you understand the sort of underlying scope of the role. And there's some good reading I can send you. There's something from the Open University on this that's just a wonderful description of this term medicalisation, where sometimes in modern midwifery and obstetric care in lots of countries in the world, there are possibly too many interventions, and actually the interventions can cause harm as well as being life-saving in some cases. So it's kind of complicated, but if you can talk about normality and talk about the scope of midwifery in this kind of question, you'll be doing really well. You could talk about specialist midwives. You clearly know about specialist midwives because you talked about it later on with female genital mutilation. So you could talk about vulnerable women, drug and alcohol specialist midwives. They're even developing sort of cancer specialist midwives in some areas, I read, which is a really interesting thought there. Teenage pregnancy, those kind of demographics. So that's a good answer overall. In terms of challenges that midwives face, so that was the next question, you were talking about the lack of staffing and sort of some of the things that might mean for care, and that's really important. There is a report called Midwifery 2020 Delivering Expectations, which you could have a look at, and it will just go through some of the changes in the clients that midwives are looking after. So when I prompted you, you did sort of say different religions and backgrounds and things like that. The women midwives are caring for are different from how they used to be, say, 50 years ago. We've got women having children at an older age because of the way our society is set up. You have your career and then you have your children. Is a much more typical way of doing things compared to in the past. It was, you get married and you have children early was sort of more of the model. And nobody is saying that every single woman who is a little bit older needs extra care, but as a group, statistically, they often do need more input. So there's more midwives, more for midwives to do there. It's very important to give individualised care to every woman and take all her sort of her background, her medical history into account, because it might be that she's totally healthy and normal. You can't just lump everybody together. But yeah, the older client situation is of note. Women have more choices than they ever did before, which is a really, really good thing. Very exciting times that women know much more about how they want to be getting through labour. They know about hypnobirthing, they know about breastfeeding, they have certain expectations about the way they're going to be interacting with healthcare professionals, and I think that's a wonderful thing, but it also means stuff is a little bit more complicated than it used to be, perhaps. Midwives have much greater scope of skills in terms of clients who years ago wouldn't have been able to have children because of chronic conditions like diabetes now the medical world has moved on a bit, so midwives are getting involved in some very complex cases there. And yeah, you talked about staffing. I think the without judgment element of your answers is coming through really strongly, and that's a hard thing to describe sometimes, because you can sometimes come across as saying, I'd work really hard not to be judgmental, which can imply that you are a bit judgmental, but you don't come across that way at all. You just want to be there for women no matter what they're going through, which is lovely. But does that make sense? That bit of feedback. Cool. So I'll send you Midwifery 2020. You can have a look at that report. That's a good one. In terms of why do you want to be a midwife, again, it was a really good answer. Your heart and soul comes through here, and the spiritually meaningful side of things of birth. I have to ask, did you memorise that, or was it written down?
I've written it down.
You've written it down, okay. So you might want to practice putting it into words without that prompting. I understand exactly why you're wanting to get the most out of this session, but you have a lovely way of putting things often, and I could tell when you were reading because it didn't have that spontaneity and that spark behind it. So it's
literally written down, just bullet points kind of thing.
Okay.
But
yeah, that's fine.
Sorry.
No, don't apologise. I just wanted to ask because I kind of noticed. But conversationally, you're very good. You build good rapport, and that's important. And I've seen you on the camera. You obviously you're giving good eye contact. Your body language is bang on. There's a lot to like. So don't be underconfident in that respect. I would say you don't have to give robotic answers. You've got this. So I would just concentrate on cutting down and getting to the meat of your answer a bit quicker. You did, you brought all of your experience in, which is really good, because sometimes I imagine if admissions tutors are extremely busy, it can be very difficult to remember who's who and what kind of experience they have. So bringing those experiences to the forefront does them a favour. It just reminds them what you have behind you. In terms of the reading around the subjects, you zoomed in on FGM, which is obviously something you're very passionate about. And again, the passion you're showing is really excellent. It might be good to mention a couple of publications that you've been reading that can be really impressive. And what you were getting at really in terms of wanting to be there for women with FGM and trying to make that experience better, trying to prevent it in the future, that's advocacy, and that's a key part of midwifery that obviously you're doing in your role at the moment. There's another document I can send you from the Open University, which is really good, and it just sort of summarises why advocacy is so important, and how it links to feminism and a few things like that. It's very interesting.
I just couldn't remember the authors, so I thought I'm not going to say them.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I'm being quite picky here.
Yeah.
Really, because I want you to get the most out of it, So please don't think you're giving bad answers. So we talked about breastfeeding next, and you got really well stuck into your own experience. That's often a difficult thing to do in interviews, because it's very easy to, it's such a complicated thing having your own experience around childbearing, but getting it into a couple of sentences in a way that shows you will relate to all women and their many different experiences of breastfeeding, that's quite hard to do. I didn't feel like that you had that problem. You were just trying to show your ability to empathise, so I think you did that well. I would try and give a more bird's eye view. This is again about condensing your answers a little bit, because really what you were saying is that women are often isolated in the way that our society is set up, and I think if you'd have just sort of summarised what you'd said like that would have been really good. But I think your life experience is important, and the fact that you know what it's like to be a mother who hasn't got her partner around, that is important experience and formative experience for you to bring, in my opinion. You did need a little bit of prompting, but you got onto sort of the culture in terms of breastfeeding isn't accepted in public, and we have all of these stories about women going into hotels, etc., and being asked to cover up. So that is still very important, and
that's hard to do when you've got a child that you move, cover up.
Yeah, I just wait for the day when that happens to me in public. Somebody's going to get somebody's going to get some information quickly. So yeah, I would say the peer support element of breastfeeding is really important, and that might be something to bring up. And just the lack of time that professionals have, and I think you touched on that well. In terms of your work-life balance answer, you have thought this through and you've talked about it with your family, and those are all really positive things. I think it's wonderful that your family know exactly what this is going to be like, and that you have organised things with clubs, etc. You didn't comment, unless I missed it, you didn't comment on specifically what you'd be doing to care for yourself. So I just wondered whether adding something might be a good idea. So sort of talking about, there's evidence to suggest that in midwifery, if you go through traumatic times, and midwifery does come with traumatic times and infant loss and things like that, as well as all the wonderful, positive, amazing stuff, you can find your empathy eroding a bit if you don't care for yourself. So if you can show that you have a good sort of grounding in your life, you have friends, you have a hobby, you haven't made midwifery the be all and end all of your success. That will be quite reassuring for admissions tutors, because there is such a high attrition rate on courses. So stuff that you enjoy doing, and that's also can make you quite memorable as well if you've got something in your life, like if you're reading a particular fictional book at the moment, or you've been to see a film with a friend, or you do a sport, that kind of thing can be really helpful. And then I think we covered the other bits and pieces in terms of what question would you bring to the admissions tutors. So how are you feeling about that feedback? How did that go?
Good. I thought it was going to be a lot worse.
Oh, bless you. I think you did really well. Yeah. Is there anything you want to ask?
No, I think you have covered it all.
Okay, great. So we'll move on to some MMIs, because I know you've got to go and pick your daughter up. So what I'll do, I did say I was going to send them to you in writing, but I think we'll keep things brief, and I'll just tell you the question, and you can tell me if you've got anything you need clarifying. The thing to remember with multiple mini interviews is sometimes the admissions tutors have been briefed not to give you much feedback in the way of eye contact and things. So if they're coming across as really not giving anything away, that doesn't mean you're doing a bad job. It just means that that's the format. Having said that, most people really enjoy the days. Even people who are very nervous say, "Oh, that was good fun."
Okay.
So this is the first question, and I will give you 3 minutes to think about it. Okay? So, universities often face challenges with courses being oversubscribed. Some faculties will decide to increase class sizes to accept more students. Some argue that this has little impact on education, since the content and teaching is the same. Others argue that, especially with critical healthcare classes, smaller class sizes offer a better education. Can you comment on this? So the situation is that universities often have courses which are oversubscribed. Some universities will just increase the class sizes, and some think that this isn't a great idea, especially with healthcare courses. So what's your thoughts? I'll give you 3 minutes, and I'll let you know when that time is up. Is there anything you want to ask me first?
No, that's fine.
Okay, so your 3 minutes has started. So That's your 3 minutes up if you want to tell me what you think about this scenario.
Okay, so I think there's pros and cons to both. I think the cons to a bigger classroom is there isn't so much one-to-one. There's going to be one teacher to X amount of students. It can be more daunting for the students that are in the classroom. It can be more daunting for the teacher itself. There'll be less support for that teacher to give to individuals. But a massive pro to me is it will give the students opportunity to support each other. Maybe there's ways of doing study groups so that you split the class into groups. Maybe they could teach each other different topics and we can all bring, bigger groups, more people to bring more to the table. I think it will let people take more of an active role in their own learning experience while at university. I think if you really, really want to be a midwife and you want to be the best midwife that you possibly can, I don't think it matters how big your classroom is or how little your classroom is, because it's what you put into it is what you're going to get out. There definitely have to be extra support there for students that are struggling, whether that's maybe a TA or extra lessons at some point. I think small classes are great, they're unique. You get to know people more on a one-to-one basis. But I don't think, I really don't think it would hurt anyone's career. I think you could still be an amazing midwife or amazing nurse or any of that, no matter how big your class is or how little your class is. It really is. If you put your life and soul into your study and becoming a midwife, then you can still get that whether your classroom's big or small.
Okay, you've got about 30 seconds. Is there anything you want to add?
No.
Okay, that's fine. We'll draw that one to a close. So that's sort of our warm-up one for the MMIs, and I'll just give you some feedback because I think that helps. Often when you're doing an MMI practice interview, it helps to get a bit of feedback and then to immediately jump back into the next question with that feedback in your brain. So what I would say is you came up with some really good points. You were worried about the support for students, that it's daunting for students to ask questions, which shows really good empathy. You were trying to think of the sort of practical solutions for making it better, like study groups and different topics for different students bringing back different topics.
Yeah.
And you were identifying some of the issues. What I would say is for this kind of question, the point isn't to come up with specific answers. With MMIs, it's not to do with specific, this is the right answer, because there won't be a right answer. The situation is more that you want to gracefully play with ideas out loud. And if you do settle on a particular path, then you need to justify it. But if you can have a think about what it means from a midwifery perspective and a non-midwifery perspective. So you sort of zoomed in on healthcare courses and midwifery in particular, but it might have been interesting to say, okay, well, if it's if it's an art and design course, something like that, it might be that you can do it at a distance and you can send your work in, and actually there's nothing wrong with that, because as an artist you're going to be working on your own a lot of the time. It's sort of a little bit entrepreneurial, and maybe that's a very good thing that you're having that experience. You could also talk about things like a lot of the world is now wanting to be educated. We have more people on the planet than ever before, and as countries develop, we will find a greater demand for education. So not everybody is going to be able to get into a university, but actually having a lot of people educated is probably a very good idea, especially as we know women in communities where there's a lot of poverty. If you offer education, they tend to have smaller families, they have better jobs, they start small businesses. It's actually a way of addressing poverty in lots of countries. So maybe in some ways the global perspective is that it's a really good idea to have large class sizes in some universities. And then you could look at it from the non-midwifery point of view. From the midwifery point of view. So you touched on it. You know, from your perspective, it's what you put into it. You're obviously really passionate, and you're wanting to be a midwife. So to you, you're going to get hold of that information no matter what. However, a good way of approaching these questions often, because it's about the ethics of the situation, is thinking about who's most vulnerable. So the women are always going to be the most vulnerable people in this situation. Is there going to be enough mentoring to train safe midwives? I think that's a sort of consideration if classes are big like that. So yeah, those are some of my suggestions. And do you see how you can get sociology in, and you can zoom out and you can zoom in, and you can It's about tolerating the uncertainty of the situation and really thinking deeply in the time that you have about what's going on. But overall, you know, a good answer. I would just say, don't assume every question is about midwifery. They are certainly all about demonstrating your midwifery skills and qualities, things like empathy, compassion, your ability to think about who needs looking after, how you advocate, etc. But you know, you can explore them from different points of view. So does that help a little bit?
Yeah, no, definitely.
Great. Okay, shall we move on to the next question?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So I gave you 3 minutes, and it's a really long time. I just wanted you to have that experience of being sat there thinking about it, because in an interview you might be given that amount of time or even a bit more, and it can feel very strange to be sat there not saying anything. So this time round I'll just give you a minute, because for our purposes we're practicing. But yeah, that was why I did that mean thing to you. So the next question is, can you tell me about a time you have demonstrated courage? And I'll just start a minute off for you to think. Okay, so that's just about the minute up. So can you tell me about a time you've demonstrated courage?
So me personally, I think the biggest thing I've ever done that took the most courage out of me was admitting that after I had my eldest son, admitting that I suffered from really bad depression afterwards. My family told me that things weren't right. I wouldn't listen to them. I thought that everyone was against me. I found it really hard to go to the doctors as a young mum also and just say I wasn't coping. I thought they were going to take my baby off me. I couldn't let anyone help me with the baby because I didn't want them to change his smell or anything like that. And I think it's the most courage I ever had to do. I remember sitting there in the doctor's surgery, shaking, crying my eyes out. I hadn't cried for months before that because I was trying to keep everything in. And it just took real courage, and it took courage, and I managed to do it, and actually it changed our lives around. I got help that I needed. I got just the services that I needed. My husband, it was a massive weight off his shoulders. Oliver seemed to calm down and had stopped crying so much. As I started feeling better myself, it gave me the courage to get out of the house, the courage to join groups, to go to groups and admit that I was struggling, that everything wasn't okay. And that's probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to do.
Okay. you've got about 1 minute and 15 seconds left. Is there anything you want to add there?
Yeah, another courage thing that I did. So with my depression, I know it's going on from that again.
Yeah.
About 3 years ago, I managed to apply for a job. I hadn't had a job in 10 years due to my depression, and I decided that it was enough. And I applied for a job as an MSW. I thought there's no way I'm going to get even an interview. I got rang up. You've got an interview. It's successful. Do you want to come in for this interview? I thought, oh no, I don't want to. But I thought I'm gonna do it. I went in for that interview. Miraculously, somehow I managed to get that job. I managed to then leave that job and go on to my access course because I decided that if I can be an MSW, then I really want to follow my dream of being a midwife. And that was one of the hardest things that I've ever done, because for the first time in 10 years, I'd been bringing a wage into my family, and I came back out of the job so that I could go to college and then hopefully on to university.
Lovely. That's just taking us to the end there. So
I could say I've probably done loads, but
of course you have. Gosh, it sounds like it to me anyway. For a start, I'm so sorry you went through that. It's postnatal depression is really horrific, and it's clearly something that's going to be formative for your practice. I keep saying this, but it just means that you understand the depth of emotion that women can go through. What I'm going to say is really difficult feedback for me to give, because you have to do what you feel is right in an interview. You have to bring them the things that you think are most important. What I would say is that you can absolutely mention that it took a huge amount of courage for you to seek help with postnatal depression, and look how far you've come now. That is astounding. It is a really courageous act, the path you've been on. If you can concentrate on the skills and insights the experience has given you to bring to women, as opposed to the experience itself, that will really help the admissions tutors see you in that context. So a lot of what you were saying was courageous, and you were almost there. You were almost saying, and this is what I want to bring to women, and these are the reasons. And you know, I remember that eye contact was really important. It was telling me every step of the way, and I would like to do that for women. I would like to listen to their stories. I would like to understand what it's like for somebody in a completely different position who perhaps doesn't have postnatal depression, but say is suffering abuse from the hands of a relative or something like that. You know, I understand the gravity of what it's like to be a parent and trying to make those decisions. Do you see how that is a little bit different from... Because it's so...
I just talked about myself.
No, you didn't just talk about yourself. There was definitely elements of you wanting to serve women there. This is just what it's about. Doing a practice interview like this, it's just, you know, when you see an actor in a film and they're they're just fantastic, and you think, oh, they must be a natural, but actually all of the emotions and the life experience they've got, they're just practiced at putting that in a way that people can pick up on. And I tell you what, it's not bad to get good at communication as somebody heading off to be a midwife, because there will be times in the heat of the moment, as you know full well, where you have to communicate really quickly with that woman to reassure them or get them through that emergency or whatever's happening. So I would just spend a bit of time talking out loud. If you want to bring your experiences into your interview, I would spend a bit of time talking out loud about the experience, and then what you can bring to the women, and what you can bring to the full spectrum of women and families in your care, not just the ones going through what you went through. So yeah, but I was really touched by what you said, and I think it's a fantastic reminder of how important care is. Yeah. Do you want to add anything here, or?
No, I don't think so. I've got it all written down. So.
Okay, and you'll have reference to all of this stuff. And I do hope you're not offended by me saying that. I really do think you'll be fantastic. I desperately want you to be able to showcase what you've got in the 3 minutes you have per little multiple mini interview session, or however long you've got, 5 minutes. It's just such a complicated thing to get across. This was my story. So it's probably years of depression you're trying to condense into a couple of sentences, and then show how that's going to apply to your career. It's not an easy thing to do, but I think you can do it. I really do think you can do it. You've clearly got a good head on your shoulders. It's just, yeah. Okay, so we've got one final question of the MMI type. So I'll read this to you. Let me know if you have any questions, and then I'll time you a minute. Okay?
Yeah.
So, final question. Can you tell me how you might address the following situation? You are a student living in shared accommodation, and one evening a mother comes and bangs on the door to your shared house, and she says, "Could you please be quiet after 8 p.m. as I'm having problems settling my children to sleep?" In this situation, you're not sure how your housemates are going to react to this. Okay, so did you hear all that? Do you understand? Yeah, and I'll time you a minute. Starting now. Okay, so just coming up to the end of that minute.
Yeah.
So if you want to tell me about this situation, what you do, what might you not do?
Okay, well, first of all, obviously, I will apologise to the woman. I would tell her that I'm going to talk to my housemates about it. I wouldn't make any promises that they'll be quiet again, because I can only ever change things about what I would do. I would ask for a meeting when everyone's free, when everyone's nice and calm, and I would just bring it to everyone's attention that obviously there's children living next door. I've noticed that we're a little bit loud. Maybe we could try and have kind of a bit more consideration and respect for our neighbours. Hopefully it's a nice house. We all want to live here for the next 3 or 4 years while we're at university. We don't want any animosity between those other neighbours in the street and ours. I wouldn't necessarily, depending on who I'm living with and how well I know them, I wouldn't necessarily mention that the neighbour has said that it's a little bit too loud and she's trying to get her kids to sleep. I'd just bring it up as maybe something that I've noticed. Depending on how well I know her, I might take her some flowers and a little apology card. And I just try and police it while I was at home. Like if I was at home one night and I realised it was really loud, I think I'd just quietly ask them if they can start turning things down. It's a bit late. I want to go to bed. We've got to live together. We've all got to respect each other. And hopefully people will just follow suit and do the same. And we can all live respectfully together.
Okay. What would you do if your housemates weren't interested in changing?
I think I would have to. I don't know if there's somebody in student services that deal with accommodation, depending on where we lived. I'd probably go to them, ask them for their advice. Maybe not name drop or anything, but definitely ask advice. See what happens, because I think it's really, really important that if we're all at the same university, that we are ambassadors for that university. We don't want people to think, oh, those people at that university don't care about anyone or don't have any respect for anyone. So I'd definitely do that. I'd definitely ask for advice. And I'd go from there and see what they asked me, or what advice they gave me to what I would do next.
Okay, lovely. So that's the end of that question, and I'll give you some feedback in just a sec.
That's the time I would just tell them all to shut up.
So you gave a really good answer in terms of talking to the women in question, and I think your intent of trying to be a good neighbour and wanting to get on with your housemates, those are all really good things. You sort of identified the issue as there's people with different agendas on the street, and you need to try and keep everybody as happy as possible. I did prompt you. Sometimes you will get an extra question in the middle of your time, and once I'd prompted you about perhaps your student colleagues, they don't want to change their behaviour, I think it was a really good answer in terms of student services. With these kind of questions, if you can get practical ideas about how to solve things in there, so the common sense stuff, which I know you're good at because you're a mother and you're an MSW and you've got a lot of life experience, that's really, really good. So practical problem solving skills in MMI is a great idea. If you're a midwife and you can't problem solve, you're going to be in trouble because things often don't go to plan. Like if you're around somebody's and the dog wants to get into the birth pool, you're going to need to work on, getting there quickly. I would say again, you could think about this from a midwifery and a non-midwifery point of view. So if you are a student midwife living in a street and a mother comes and bangs on your door, she's of childbearing age, are you in a placement that means you might end up looking after her? And if so, it's not going to be the best working relationship. So it's quite important to address. The other thing is you could use it as a jumping off point for thinking about how everybody might be feeling in this situation. That's always quite a good thing to do because then you show your empathy skills. So this mother, what's she like? What's her body language like? Is she very young? Is she from a different background? Does she speak English well? Is it that she just wants to come for a chat? Does she know that you're a student midwife and that's why she's come round? Is there really not a problem at all? Or is it that you've been a really busy student midwife and you actually had no idea that the other people in your house that you live with who might not be student midwives are behaving this way? And is that something that you need to think about that's a practice point? If it's a non-midwifery situation, the right ethical thing to do is probably still try to get these two parties that don't want the same things. It's to try and find some kind of it's trying to resolve the conflict. So it might be that speaking to your landlord, there might be particular legal rules about what can go on after a certain time of night. It might be, going to the uni is a really good idea. If you've got concerns about maybe there are big parties going on and you're not there often enough to know, but it might be worth thinking about, even if there's drunks or something in the house, and maybe that's what she's worried about. That could be something that you need to consider as well. And as always, it's the vulnerability of the situation. If you can show insight into what your housemates are thinking, that also might be a good idea. So they're very young, maybe they think their agenda is just to party, and having that insight into what they want to do and then trying to get them to empathise, saying, you might be a parent one day and how would you feel, because it's quite a brave thing to do to come and bang on the door. I think the flowers is a nice thing to do, definitely. If you've resolved the situation, that's a lovely thought to try and keep everybody together. And yeah, I wonder whether another problem solving point might be, sometimes kids, they need to go to sleep between 7 and 9 or something, but then actually if you make a noise after that, it's not such a big deal. It depends on the child and it depends on the mother and what they think, but perhaps you could, keep things down. Maybe you could go around to another house and party there, maybe you could go to the pub. Just all of these basic problem solving things can be really helpful as well in this kind of question. Can you see how you can take it into loads of different directions? It doesn't have to be just one thought. You really do have permission to go anywhere. Yeah, cool. But you did well. Don't think it's a bad answer. Just some extra. If you can go above and beyond, really, really great. So that is the end of quite a comprehensive interview. I think we've covered a lot there. How are you feeling about everything?
Yeah, good. I think when I next go for my next interview, I think I'll definitely be thinking more outside the box instead of trying to just think in the box.
Yeah.
Makes sense? So instead of going, okay, so I'm going to literally just answer that question, I think you've given me the confidence to go, actually, you know what, I'm going to spread a little bit further.
Okay.
You know, like here, it's making all the noise on an evening. It's not just going to be affecting that one family, where it's probably affecting half of the street, maybe all the street, and it's things like that. Like, what can we do to make everything better? You know.
And did you have any hesitations about doing a practice interview?
Yes.
What were those?
I think it's because obviously, like, I read your book quite a lot.
Yeah.
And I think when I'm on my own and answering to myself, sometimes I think, oh, I've answered that really well. And then I'll go to my husband, oh, can you ask me this question? And he'll ask me, and things that I think that I've answered really well, I then start guessing what the other person's thinking, and I spend more time guessing what the other person's thinking about what I'm saying than concentrating on what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I think you just saying it's okay, you know, you're doing okay, you're going in the right direction, at least hopefully. That will hopefully stop me from trying to guess what you're thinking while I'm speaking.
Yeah, I think you do have to stick to your integrity and try and just keep bringing it back to why you're going to be a brilliant midwife. That's the essence of every question. If you can bring it back to that,
to get people to see that I really want it. I'm really passionate about this. This is what, it's not what I want, it's what I'm going to go out and get. It's putting that across to other people that I worry about.
Yeah. and what you can offer to the women is.
And I believe I do have a lot to offer.
Yeah, you do. I agree. Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So that's what you get in a practice interview. It's that ability to practice under pressure, and if you get feedback from friends and family, that can be fantastic, but it's also quite difficult for them to see you as somebody they've just met in an interview situation. And as our applicant said, sometimes you end up guessing what they might be thinking because you know them a bit too well. So what you'll get out of a practice interview is we'll look at your personal statement together, we'll think about the universities you're going to and do some research on the type of interview that they tend to give. We can look at specifics that you're having trouble with, and we can do either a traditional or MMI interview or a combination of the two. Sometimes group interviews, you can do a little practice on the kinds of questions that you get there. Obviously, there's no way I could cover absolutely everything in one video, and everybody has different needs. So sometimes people just coming out of school, they have a different set of needs because their academic history is very strong, but perhaps they don't have quite as much life experience. So, you know, those are the things to think about in an interview, how to present what you have to offer, because cohorts are 50-50, you know, often 50% mature students, 50% school leavers. It doesn't mean anybody's any better than anyone else, it just means a good mix, and it's knowing how to get that over in your interview, the special things that you can bring to the profession, the skills and experiences that you have. I think it's important to note as well, you can do loads and loads of midwifery reading, but it is really good to practice it out loud. Even if you can't have an interview with me or a mock interview at your college or something like that, I would suggest recording yourself. If you can get somebody professional to give you feedback, it means that the changes that you know you need to make in terms of your interview style, they're far more likely to stay because you'll get that reiterated a few times. It's difficult on your own to make those changes to begin to have a really good interview style. To find out more about the interviews, you can go to midwifediaries.com/services and you can have a look at the whole process and how you sign up. In terms of the discount that we were talking about at the beginning of this video, if you've read my book, which you can get on Amazon, it's called Becoming a Student Midwife, the Survival Guide for Passionate Applicants, you can get 10% off the coaching, the interview coaching. All you need to do to get this is let me know in an email that you've left an honest Amazon review. It's very difficult for me to know if you've read the book, especially if you have got it gifted. It happens on the secret community for midwives in the making on Facebook. A lot of people give their books to the next round of students, which I think is really lovely. So if you have read the book and you've left an honest review, I won't take offence if you want to give me any constructive feedback or anything like that. It gives me a way of knowing that you've read the book, and then I can give you your 10% off. You can book via the website, or you can book by emailing me on ellie@midwifediaries.com, and you can ask me any questions as well. Sometimes a quicker way to get your questions answered is to email Christy, who is my amazing assistant, so team@midwifediaries.com, and she is a lot more hawk-like with her inbox, and she can answer sort of any basic questions you have on applying or interview technique or anything like that. So what it means is a practice interview where you get the whole of my attention. I love the process, I'm really passionate about it, and you'll get the specific feedback that you can use to go on, and it's knowing how to interview as well. It will open doors for you in terms of becoming a student midwife, but also when you get to the process of applying for midwifery jobs, these kind of interview skills are really useful. And I remember exactly what it was like going into those interviews. As you might know, I've told the story of where I interviewed in one place in particular, and I just got myself into a right tiz, I think would be the technical term, because somebody made a comment about the fact that I looked very young, and it really threw me. And but the experience of going through that interview was what made it possible for me to get a place later on in the cycle. So it's just about getting that practice in early if you can. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you, and thanks very much for watching, and thank you so much to the applicant who so generously shared her answers with us.